Well, good morning, friends, and welcome to my channel. I am Crystal, and this is Homemaking on the Homestead. And I am excited to bring you today's video. I've been working on it for a while. Then I got a cold, just life comes in at every moment it can, right? To disrupt plans, but that's okay. I'm on the other side, so is my husband, and I've actually been doing some Christmas stuff. You can see I've got my strawberry cranberry jam that I make every year. I did that yesterday. Anyway, but right now I am excited to get this video out to you. When you've been cooking for a family, sometimes it's hard to make that adjustment to empty nest cooking and have reasonable sized meals. And I know I've had my fair share of struggles. And yes, you can freeze them and you can eat leftovers, which we do. I do all of that when I make too big of a casserole or too big of a pot of soup or something like that. But sometimes you just want something that is more manageable for day-to-day eating and cooking and variety and all that kind of stuff. So I decided to bring you along with me for a week of cooking that I did recently for just the two of us. And I hope that you enjoy that and get some good ideas flowing for what different types of meals that you might like to make. If the meal has a recipe, it will be down in the description box. If it has a link to a recipe that I used, I will add that to the description box below too. Okay, guys, so let's get cooking. This first meal was going to be super simple. I had some spinach mozzarella ravioli, pineapple and bacon chicken sausages, some leftover mushrooms and onion, and in that mozzarella ravioli, there is a little seasoning packet. I decided to just chop up those veggies. The mushrooms definitely needed to be used, and saute those up to soften them up as much as possible. Also, while I am cooking up these mushrooms and onions, I threw in a little bit of salt so that I can just kind of make sure every layer is seasoned. I removed those from the heat and set them aside. Now it was time for me to heat up my water and get those raviolis cooking. They only take a few minutes, and once they were done, I removed them from the heat and tossed them in a little bit of olive oil and sprinkled some of that seasoning packet over the top. I think they give you 2 or 3 of those packets in that big bag, so I didn't use the whole thing, just enough to lightly coat them. And I set those aside so that I could work on my sausages now. These sausages come in a package. I get them from Costco. They come in a package with 3 1-pound packages. So for this meal and most meals, I just used 1 pound. So that package of sausage technically will give me 3 different meals. Now I was ready to heat those up in a little avocado oil, and I just kind of stir them around, toss them around until they get kind of browned on each side. That's it. They're already fully cooked, so I don't have to. It doesn't take long to do that part. I added those cooked mushrooms and onions back in. In between all of this, I had also pulled out some little corn niblets, they call them, and I get them in the freezer section, and I had cooked those up in my Instant Pot. I had a salad left over from the day before, and that was dinner for us that night, and it was really good. It was delicious and super easy. The next night we had a few leftovers that we could share, but I knew that wasn't going to be enough. So I decided to make some potato soup. Fall time and soups just seem to go hand in hand. But the first thing that I needed to do was to get some chicken broth made. I pulled a chicken carcass that I had from a rotisserie chicken in the freezer. I pulled that out and started some chicken broth in my Instant Pot. I usually let that cook for an hour so the chicken broth is nice and rich and flavorful. Then I got busy washing up my potatoes and chopping up my onion and grating up my carrot. I used about 3 slices of thick sliced bacon and cut that up to get that sauteing in my pan and get it cooked up. And never mind that mess in the back there. I have been going through things and organizing my stuff, cleaning out closets, and that's the catch-all place. Once the bacon was done, I removed that from my pan, and I removed some of the oil as well. Just so I had enough left in there to kind of saute and soften up these onions and carrots. Once my broth in the Instant Pot had finished, I went ahead and strained that and poured a couple cups of that broth into my soup pot, seasoned it with a little salt, and my diced and cut up bite-sized pieces of potatoes. I covered that up and let those cook until the potatoes were tender. When the potatoes were done cooking, I went ahead and whisked some flour into my milk and added that to the soup. I stirred and simmered that until it was nice and thick. And then I added my cheese. Now, yes, I am using Velveeta cheese. I don't normally. I had bought some for a recipe and I just had some left over. You could certainly use cheddar if you'd rather. And I added the bacon. I let that kind of just simmer and heat up. And that was it. We added that soup to last night's leftovers, which is something I typically do. If I have leftovers but not enough to eat, I will add something else, which will probably end up having leftovers like this soup did. And that will complete the meal for us for that night. And no food goes to waste doing it that way. We can also eat them for lunch. Neither of us eat lunch typically, so this method has worked the best for me. For night number 3, I had a little bit of the soup left over, but again, probably not enough for both of us to have for dinner. I had also made a salad the night before, so I still had some salad left over. I just decided to add some more greens to it just to make sure that we had plenty and to use up what I had left in my container of salad greens. Now I just needed to add one more thing to this meal, and that ended up being these salmon patties from Costco. They were a request by my husband. These things are so delicious, and the ingredients are minimal compared to what I've seen in others, and just very tasty. We love them, and they're one of my husband's favorites. So when I asked him, that's what he said he wanted to have. And they only take about maybe 10-12 minutes to heat up in a frying pan, and then they're done. And that made a super easy, quick meal that was very delicious. We ended up eating all of that, and it was time to start something brand new. So, as you can probably guess here, I am doing spaghetti and meatballs and some frozen roasted vegetable. When I roast my frozen vegetables, I tend to lay them out without touching, not too overcrowded on my pan, and I let them go into the oven without putting any olive oil on them or any seasonings or anything like that. I give them an opportunity to defrost and kind of dry out. Otherwise, I have found that it's really easy to end up with mushy vegetables. While those are starting to roast, I am going to chop up some extra vegetables to add into my spaghetti sauce. I am heating up some olive oil, adding those vegetables, and going to saute them until they're nice. And while that's going on, I'm getting my spaghetti cooking. I'm actually using linguine, which is, I prefer that. And then it was time to add those meatballs, and I'm going to just kind of let all that simmer for a few minutes until those meatballs have defrosted, and add my jar of marinara sauce. At this point, my frozen veggies have cooked about halfway through, so it is time for me to drizzle a little bit of olive oil. I added salt to it as well, and sometimes I'll add garlic, but for this one I just added salt, and put them back into the oven to finish cooking and roasting. Now that my spaghetti sauce was nice and hot, it was time for me to go ahead and add the noodles that had already finished cooking and draining, and get that all mixed up. My veggies came out of the oven looking perfect, and so that was ready, and my spaghetti sauce is all ready. I quickly made up a batch of garlic toast to go along with this. I do it in my toaster oven. It's quick to make and a whole lot less expensive than Texas toast. There you go. That was the finished dinner for that night, and it was delicious. We did end up eating this for 2 nights in a row. Now it was time to start something new, and I was in the mood for some Mexican food as well as soup, so we're going to make some Mexican black bean and chicken soup. I began by starting to cook my beans in my Instant Pot, and I did that earlier in the day so that they could be nicely cooked by the time I was ready to make my soup. Now, I let my beans cook in the Instant Pot for about 45 minutes. I like beans, or we like our beans super soft. If you don't like them that soft, then you'll want to cook them less amount of times. I've seen as little as 25 minutes. That just still ends up being harder than we particularly like. Also for this, I was using a package of boneless, skinless thighs. I've had some salsa here. I had a tiny bit of corn to use up in a bag in the freezer, cream cheese, an onion, and some cheddar cheese. I started this soup up by chopping up an onion in and pulling out some of my chicken broth that I had made from a couple days past. Wasn't sure how much I was going to end up using. I sauteed those onions until they were nice and soft, and then I added my chicken thighs right into that pot and kind of let them get a little bit cooked on each side. I did not sear them or brown them. You certainly could if you wanted to, but I didn't think it was necessary for this. Then I just lightly seasoned them with some salt, some garlic, and a little bit of pepper. Then I added my quart jar of very well gelled chicken broth. That's why I love making it in the Instant Pot. It always ends up coming out so nicely gelled and tastes delicious. But I let that come to a boil. I covered it, and now I let it simmer until my chicken was completely cooked. I removed my cooked chicken, set that aside, and then started adding my other ingredients. That's what I had left of my bag of corn. I could have added more corn, but I just figured I would use up what I had. Then I measured out 1 cup of salsa and added that in there as well. And then I started adding in my black beans. I just kind of did this 1 cup at a time. I think I ended up with about 4 cups in total that I added, but I tend to just add, stir, and I'm just measuring with the heart, as they say. Whatever seems to look good to me. Then it was time to add the cream cheese. I had a 4-ounce block of cream cheese, or half of an 8-ounce block, which was fairly soft from having sat out on the counter, which makes for easy melting in the soup. Now I was going to season it with some taco seasoning just to give it a little bit more of that Mexican taste that I was looking for. I covered that up and I let everything simmer together to cook the corn and get all those flavors nice and well blended. And after a little bit, I went ahead and added my chicken, which I had shredded up. It had cooked really nicely, so it was super easy to shred up. And now the soup is looking pretty darn good. I think the only thing I had left to add was my cheddar cheese, which I'd end up saying was probably a generous cup or so. I kind of added it and stirred and added more until it seemed right. I didn't follow any kind of a recipe for this. I just kind of was doing my own thing, and I'd have to say it turned out so good. We had that with some tortilla chips, salsa, and some veggies, and it was a delicious dinner. We ended up enjoying this soup for 2 nights in a row, and on the second night, the only thing I added to that was some dessert. And I pulled out one of my homemade apple pies from the freezer. I had actually made these last year. I have a video on that, which I will certainly link below. I had made about 5 of them all at once and put them in the freezer. This is a recipe I've used for years and years, and it is always good, and it bakes up just fine. And all you have to do is kind of basically pop it into the oven covered in foil and let that bake for, I think it takes maybe about an hour, removing the foil about halfway through, and there you have it, some absolutely delicious homemade apple pie. And we really enjoyed that to go with that meal that night. Okay, friends, I hope you enjoyed coming along with me this week while I cooked dinner for hubby and I hope it gave you some ideas, some inspiration, maybe some new recipes or thoughts about new recipes. Please don't forget to like this video and leave me a comment below. I would love to hear from you. I'd love to hear your ideas and your thoughts about cooking for 2. Have you struggled? Do you do okay with it? Anything like that would also be helpful to anybody else that comes through the comment section and reads that. I pray that you have a blessed day today, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye-bye.